I'd like to welcome you to the gardens at Elm Bank, the home of the Massachusetts Horticultural Society. I'm Wayne Mezet, chairman of the board, and we're delighted to have you join us on this beautiful evening. It's certainly a pleasure to have an evening we can enjoy outdoors. I want to thank our Garden Party Steering Committee for their incredible effort making this such a special evening. Alicia Hess-Cleary, she's the chair and trustee of the committee. Lisa Abels, a trustee on our board. Thank you. Stephanie Clan. Stephanie's the one that did all of the design work. Thank you, Stephanie. Doing the setup, the interior of the manor house that you can take a look at here. Lisa Giger. Lisa. Betty Gibson. I'm sorry, Betsy Gibson. Annette Lee, who's an overseer at MassHort. Susan McCants. Susan? Thank you, Susan. And now I'd like to introduce our Garden Party Chair, Alicia Hess-Cleary.
Well, thank you for coming. Gosh, who do we thank for this amazing night and this weather? But I do have so many people to thank tonight, so for putting this together. First and foremost, our steering committee. It grew this year, and it's one of those committees that has been so much fun to work with because it's a creative group of people who, no matter what problem you have, they're able to solve it. And so that's a fun group to work with. Thank you, everybody. Of course, our honorary committee members as well, who helped promote this event and bring in all of you who are here tonight. I'm grateful for you for drawing attention to this amazing Italianate garden and to this manor home. Without your help and spreading the word, we wouldn't be able to fill this garden tonight. I have to give special recognition to Stephanie Clan, who is the designer, who was able to get almost every piece in the room tonight on loan from different shops. So please take a look at the list. There are things for sale. The paintings are for sale. And I'll list some of the sponsors so you can get the names. But please look in the program specifically so you can see who participated in setting this room up. But thank you, Stephanie. This was not an easy job. Of course, as you know, when you run these events, there are all kinds of surprises at the last minute. And I'm really grateful for everyone's patience and coolness. I want to thank Betsy Gibson for the flowers tonight on the table. They're beautiful, and that also takes a lot of work. You have to figure out every kind of vase shape, the wind, the sun, the height, the light, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and the flowers as well inside the building. So thank you to the designers. I'm going to quickly list the name of the sponsors, who we are forever grateful for. So thank you, Weston Nurseries, Allendale Farm, Bartlett Tree Experts, Lux Bond, Schumacher, Bushel, Woods Hill Table, Sam Adams, Betsy Gibson Designs, Mahoney's Garden Center, Falsetti and Pianos, Simpson Garden Design, Cavecchio Greenhouses, Furniture Consignment Gallery, C&T Design, Design Light, Peppers, our caterers tonight. They've done a beautiful job. Thank you, Peppers. Michael's Coffin, Brookline Village Antiques, R.P. Marzilli, David B. Walk, Penny Jenkins, Susan Lee, Hammond Residential Real Estate, Mira and Carl Tucker, Natalie Wolf. Thank you so much to all the sponsors. I'd like to just invite all of you not only to peek into the house tonight, but I want to pique your imagination about what this estate could be in the future. And we have a mission to turn this into a regional, if not national, garden tourist destination site. So you are part of the first group of people invited here tonight supporting that mission. And I'd like to introduce our executive director, who's going to speak a little more about that, Catherine McDonald. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. We are so delighted to see so many people here, so many people who we've seen around the gardens for years. But I'd like to know who's here, raise your hand for the first time ever. That's great. That's great. And while we have some hands up over in the corner, we have a very special guest, Beverly Davis of Baltimore, and her daughter Iris are here. And Beverly is the grandniece of Alice Boatzell, who owns this house. And their family estate was Greylock, which is now the Carroll Center down the street. And I had the pleasure of working with Beverly and a writer when we were working with Wellesley Weston magazine on an article about this house this spring. And what we really wanted to do was to bring the house alive by talking about the people that lived here and what they did. And I think that's part of our mission today, is not only to bring the gardens at Elm Bank to life, but also this house and make it a real center for people to really enjoy visiting the gardens and to imagine what it could be. We've just embarked on a master plan process, and really it's to look at the next years that bring MassHort to its 200th anniversary, which is 2029. And we've been here under a master plan that was developed in 1986 before MassHort moved out here. And about 80% of that master plan was realized, including the beautiful gardens you're standing in tonight. And also, I think if you haven't seen the Bressingham Garden, I do hope that you will move around and see the gardens. The Bressingham Garden, designed by Adrian Bloom, which is right outside the Copper Beech hedge. And of course, our fabulous children's garden designed by Julie Monmouth-Zervi. And Julie's here tonight someplace. Where's Julie? Anyways, Julie's here tonight too. But, you know, there are other things that have yet to be developed. This is an Olmsted Brothers garden, and it was designed by Percival Gallagher. And beyond the Copper Beech hedge to my left is an Asian garden that was designed by the Olmsted Brothers. It had a beautiful bridge that was designed to mimic a bridge in Japan. We have the original plans for that bridge, and right now it's down in the weeds waiting to be rediscovered and to really add to what people can do when they visit here. So I do hope you'll grab a copy of the Wellesley Weston article, which talks a little bit about the house, but I'd like you to get involved with what we're doing at MassHort, you know, with the gardens, and think if you could help us reach a future that really serves our greater community. We'd really like to do that. Also, we have here tonight Kathleen Fahey, who is the curator of the Wellesley Historical Society, and she's going to speak next a little bit about this estate. She's been with Wellesley Historical Society for 7 years, and she serves on the Belmont Historical Society, where she lives with her family. She has a BA in American Studies from UMass Lowell and a master's in history from Northeastern University. She is a former curator of Mount Auburn Cemetery, which, P.S., MassHort invented in 1831. And I think we were receiving commissions up into the 50s. Someone had once told me that. But she's done a lot in the area, and we're so excited that she's done some research on our beautiful manor house, and I invite her to come talk about it.
It's really exciting to think about Mass Horticultural Society's future here at Elm Bank. But tonight I'd like to actually just take a little step back and tell you a little bit about the past of this estate. Now, the mission of the Wellesley Historical Society is to preserve Wellesley's history, and we're so fortunate that we have a partner here in the Mass Horticultural Society to help preserve this significant estate here in Wellesley. Now, this estate is very historically significant because it's an example of an estate in the country place era. And that's basically a term that's used by historians to describe the period from 1890 to 1930, when wealthy Americans are moving out into the country and they're building grand estates with extensive gardens. Now, Elm Bank is an important part of that history because it's still here today. So many of those estates were broken up and developed into residential areas. And we're really fortunate that Mass Horticultural Society took over the care of this estate in the 1990s.
To speak a little bit closer
Oh,
to the mic.
sorry. We're so lucky that Mass Horticultural Society took over the estate in the 1990s and has been bringing it back to life again. Now I'll tell you a little bit more about the history of the estate. The Cheney family owned the estate in the 19th century. It was then inherited by Alice Cheney in the 1900s. When she married William Baltzell in the early 1900s, she actually decided to start fresh and to start over. She took down the family's Victorian estate and Victorian gardens, and she actually worked with the famous architects Career and Hastings to build this beautiful house you see here behind me between 1907 and 1908. They designed it in the Georgian Revival style, and they also worked with world-famous landscape architects, the Olmsted Brother firm, to design the gardens here. You're standing in the Italian garden tonight, but as Kathy mentioned, there were additional gardens here, and the goal of the architects and the landscape architects and the owners working together during this country place era, their goal was to create a series of outdoor rooms that would flow out from the house and allow the family to do entertaining outside. Now, some of the other gardens that they had here on the estate included the Asian garden, which Kathy talked about. There was also a sundial garden, a lilac garden, dahlia, rose, and vegetable gardens. Now, tonight I'd like to focus on the Italian garden because that's where we are this evening. This was created over a 14-year span between 1914 and 1928 by the Olmsted brothers. Now, you might be wondering what exactly is an Italianate garden, or what makes this garden an Italianate garden. And there's sort of a certain recipe that landscape architects used at the turn of the 1900s. Italianate gardens were very popular from about 1900 to 1930. One of the first characteristics of an Italianate garden from this time period is a formal geometric plan, and you've probably noticed how the garden is in the shape of a rectangle. Italianate gardens also usually employ a long central axis, and many of you are standing in the central pathway tonight, and that would be that long central axis. They also use intersecting minor axes, and that would be one of the pathways that you entered in for the party tonight. Landscape architects love to use architectural elements in Italianate gardens at this time period. They usually incorporated things like pergolas and colonnades. Now, even though the garden doesn't exactly have a pergola or a colonnade in it, what I really like about this garden is that it really blends seamlessly from the house down the terrace and into the garden, and it really almost feels like the balustrade is part of the garden. And also, because the house blends so seamlessly, it's almost as though the colonnade is also part of the garden. And I suspect that's the reason why the Olmsted firm didn't actually add additional architectural elements. Another important element is the water element. And I'm sure all of you saw the beautiful pool that we have in the middle of the garden there. Ornamentation is another important aspect. Landscape architects would add statues, benches, and urns to gardens, and you can see those placed throughout the garden. Now, the Baltzell family actually gets bonus points because the baptismal font in the fountain or the pool actually came from Italy. So not only do they have an Italianate garden, but they actually have Italian ornamentation in their Italian garden. The other interesting thing about Italianate gardens is that they employ the use of flat plains of grass. Now, flowers are okay in Italianate garden, but they're not really required. I've seen a lot of Italianate gardens that don't actually have any flowers, but most New England Italianate gardeners do have the flowers. New England gardeners can't seem to live without their flower beds. So they did incorporate them into here. And what I really love about this garden, again, is the way that it does blend seamlessly from the house. I visited over the last 20 years, I visited a lot of Italianate gardens because I wrote my master's thesis on Italianate gardens. So wherever I go, I look for Italianate gardens. And this is one of the few gardens that works so well with the house. And it really does blend seamlessly here. Now, the other interesting thing about Italianate gardens, and this one, is that it really fits into the larger context of landscape gardening at the time period. If you look at the architecture behind me, the Georgian revival is becoming very popular, neoclassical styles, and these formal geometric plans work really well with the symmetrical facades of this type of architecture. This is also fitting into the scholarship that's happening at the time on Italianate gardens. A famous landscape architect, Charles Platt, wrote a book in 1894 about Italianate gardens. Edith Wharton, the writer, was actually really interested in Italianate gardens and in interior design, and she wrote a book called Italian Villas in Their Gardens from 1904. There was also a myriad amount of books and periodicals that are writing about gardens at this time period. And a lot of the writers are strongly suggesting to estate owners that Italian gardens are the way to go. And people are really taking this advice to heart. And Italianate gardens were installed from California to Florida to Massachusetts at estates just like this one. But what makes this one so special is that it's still here. So many of the Italianate gardens have been lost to time. And not only is this one here, but it's been beautifully restored by Mass Horticultural Society. In 1999, they actually went over to the Olmsted National Historic Site, got the original plans, and they really brought back the garden as faithfully as they could. And then in 2011, they actually restored the beautiful baptismal font, which is really the centerpiece of this garden. And the work on the garden is always ongoing, and I think that's a constant theme with gardens. And we're so lucky that Mass Horticultural Society has really dedicated to keeping the work ongoing here in the Italianate garden and also with the Manor House. And in my view, you really can't have one without the other, and it's really exciting to think about the future of the Manor House. At the time that these were built, these would have been integral to each other. You wouldn't have had the Manor House without the Italian garden or vice versa. So I think it's definitely time to think about bringing the Manor House to life again as well. So thank you all so much for taking the time to hear about the Italianate garden history, and I'll turn it back to Alicia.
Thank you so much, Kathy, from the Wellesley Historical Society. So thank you again, everyone, for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Thanks.